Piers Morgan Uncensored is a platform that allows for allows a platform for many controversial views by controversial people. That's kind of his shtick. Uh, it is very selective in kind of the side of an issue that he picks, as you have to be, because you have one show a day or however often, and he picks carefully. His one of his most recent picks for who to have on his show was Dan Bilzerian, the Instagram um, uh, what's it called? Instagram influencer turned uh, what was it? Investor defrauder turned public public opinion leader who has for the past year been promoting a lot of anti-Semitic bullshit. I think he took it to the next level on this one. It was it was 30 minutes long. We have about 18 clips of it. We have less than an hour. So welcome to the reality show. I'm joined by Anders and Michael. We're gonna go right to the first clip. But yeah, let's go.
Well, I mean, I was writing a book. I think that was a, big focus and that took a lot of time. And then I was just pretty much over it. I looked at social media like a video game that I beat and that, everybody else wanted to play and I was just kind of tired of playing. And the only reason I really came back was because I felt like I had this big platform and I really disagreed with what was going on in Israel, that we were funding this genocide. And so I felt like I had an obligation to use my platform to say what I, thought was right.
All right. I don't know if there's that much to comment on there because just the way the anti-Israel crowd uses the word genocide automatically. I was watching an Owen Jones video, the first couple of minutes of an Owen Jones video yesterday, and within the first 15 seconds, he said genocide three times. These people, we compared Owen Jones a few days ago to Goebbels. I think that that very much is a Goebbels approach of if you repeat a lie often enough, it becomes the truth. But yeah, with this clip, that is as far as he goes. And if you when you see later, it's not that's nothing compared to what we'll see later. But I will go to you guys if you have anything to say about that, Anders.
Yeah, not specifically on this first clip. I will have more to say later. But so I was not familiar with this guy before I watched the video, and neither do I follow Piers Morgan frequently. I mean, I'm in the US and I don't know where his show is broadcasted. So my general takeaway was, I thought Pierce did an okay job of refuting him, and but more than that, I'm wondering. I mean, should you even give this guy a platform? Maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't. Apparently, as he said, he has a huge following. I don't know if he has a huge following because he is an anti-Semite or it is because of his previous endeavors. Apparently, he was a poker player and a philanderer in general. And I mean, from his looks, it seems like he is targeting a certain demographic, if you like. So yeah, my general takeaway was, should Piers Morgan really have him on? Yeah, so let me stop there and then I'll have more to offer later as we get through the video.
All right, I will say I completely disagree that Piers Morgan pushed back well, but we'll get to that later. Yeah, and just generally, for you and anybody else who doesn't know Dan Bilzerian, yeah, he became famous by posting on Instagram pictures of himself surrounded by women in bikinis in nice houses with pools and stuff like that. Basically, living the teenage boy dream, and that's how he became famous. He is a poker player. Some of his boasting about his poker winnings are lies that he was caught in the past. He then had a cannabis company where he seemingly fleeced investors. So yeah, he has a history that kind of leads into his current role as a commentator. Michael.
Well, I think it's always good to come in the middle of a play. and decide that that's the first act, right? I mean, he introduces it so nicely. I just kind of decided to work on the genocide that's going on in Israel, as if Israel was just like Israel produces apples and oranges. It's the genocide that Israel's committing. And it's the middle of the play, and we don't get to hear about anything. And we also use the term loosely. And obviously, we're supposed to believe that this gentleman is an expert on what genocide constitutes genocide, never mind warfare. So there are a lot of people that are terribly corrupt out there, and unfortunately, they have a platform now. And it goes back to, if they have followers, like you said, just because you repeat something a lot of times, just because there's a lot of people that believe you, doesn't mean it's the truth. The world was flat for a long time. The majority said so. And the world isn't flat. It didn't matter how many people said so. The truth always wins.
Yeah. And again, he has that audience because, men like looking at attractive women in bikinis, not because of his great intellect, as we're gonna see. Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat. Jonathan says, support Razi and ARCUK, the ARCUK team, changing the culture one show at a time. Yeah, thank you, and I absolutely agree. There's a link there if you want to become a member. Imagine what we could do if we had Dan Bilzerian's imaginary 60 million poker in poker earnings in a year. Which, by the way, I saw something about Daniel Negreanu a few months ago. So much more famous for his poker skills, and it said that his lifetime earnings is like 13 million. So I kind of doubt that Dan Bilzerian earned 50 or 60 million in a year. But if that was ARCUK's budget, we would be changing the culture much quicker than we currently are. So if you think this is a good cause and want to contribute, there are links there in the chat. Let's go to the next clip of Dan Bilzerian.
Well, let's talk about some of that, because you've been very vocal about Israel in particular. Even when Yahya Sinwar, the head of Hamas, was killed by the IDF, you were out lauding him as a hero. To most people, he's the despicable head of a terrorist organization that perpetrated on October the 7th one of the worst terror attacks in modern history. What's heroic about that?
Well, I think when you look at it in a vacuum, it's a very different picture. It's kind of like if I, raped your mother and I kicked you in the nuts 3 times and then you punched me in the face and everybody just wanted to focus on you punching me in the face. I think that would be a very different conversation than when you looked at it, the whole of what happened. And the whole of what happened was Nakba. That's where it started. You have 750,000 Palestinians that got displaced. And then you've got multiple, acts of terror, in my opinion, on Israel's side that would make October 7th look like nothing. So to me, I think it was a retaliation, and I think that Hamas is a resistance organization, and I think that Israel is a terrorist.
So first of all, definitions are important, and Dan, whatever process you go through before you open your mouth does not qualify as thinking. But Tenebris says in the chat, WTF, hang on, this is nothing compared to what's coming. Yeah, it's interesting, the analogy, using rape as an analogy, considering the people he supports are rapists. I guarantee you he had no idea who Yahya Sinwar was a year ago before he became a commentator for this. But so much of this, and we're going to see this moving forward, so much of this sounds like he kind of half read, like skimmed through some articles on electronic intifada or something, remembered some buzzwords that are good for the algorithm, and just repeats them in what sometimes he manages to put into coherent sentences, but often does not. Anders.
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, just like he used genocide in the first clip, here he's using Israel's terror attacks, define your terms, as you're saying. Who was the culprit, who started it? There is no mention of that, no context like that.
Michael.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to start with the term Nakba, which was, of course, the UN declaration to Israel and the people that were mostly Jordanian, as far as I'm aware, that they were going to separate the areas in Judea and Samaria and where Israel is now into different areas. And it was a UN approved and UN decision to move that out from under the British Empire. That was the Nakba right there. It was an absolutely peaceful decision, and there were marked off territories, etc. Now, if the fact that 6 different Arab armies declared war on Israel after the UN and tried to annihilate it before it got started, that's the Nakba. That Israel accepted the UN declaration. The Arabs living in the area did not accept the declaration. The people living in the area that were Arab followed the direction of the Arab armies, which told them to get out of the area because the Arab armies were going to decimate Israel. And if they wanted to live, they better get out of there or they're going to get caught in the crossfire. And that's the Nakba. And if you start with a completely false proposition, then you're going to end up coming up with all sorts of ridiculousness. Forget about his logic later on, which is completely flawed. And forget about the fact that every modern country, every good Western country in the world has declared Hamas a terror organization, and Sinwar is the head of that terror organization. Forget about that. But just start with what he says. And if you want to start with that, then you're already down a path to evil and misinformation and lying, and it can only lead to death.
Yeah, Nakba, Arabic for disaster. The disaster is the existence of the state of Israel. It's the fact that Jews are allowed to live, as the WEB says, is them losing to Israel. Yeah, them starting a war and losing it, and not being able to get rid of the Jewish state. That is the disaster. And you can hear in upcoming clips of Dan Bilzerian why this is such a disaster for him as well. Somebody asked, why are there no women on the panel? In a recent interview, a different interview, Dan Bilzerian said that he's considering converting to Islam. So we wanted to, respect his new religion and decided this is going to be men only. Let's go to the next clip.
When did Israel kill 1,200 people in a single day and wound nearly 7,000?
Well, I mean, you have, Nakba, there was, 15,000 people killed during Nakba. I mean, there was Sabra and Shatila. I mean, that was 3,500 civilians. Then you have 2014, they killed 1,500 civilians. 500 plus were kids. I mean, so any one of those days would have been much worse than October 7th, but nobody really talks about
those
that.
didn't happen in single
days. And October 7th is not nearly as bad as what they say.
Well, those didn't happen in single days, as you know.
Well, I mean, you have, Sabra and Shatila, that was 3,500 people, so that was basically 7 October 7ths. And October 7th, I think the numbers get inflated a lot too, because you're not taking into account that it was only 650 civilians, and there was the Hannibal Directive that was employed, and the Hannibal Directive is when the military is basically killing civilians so that they aren't taken as hostages. And, that had to be hundreds of people, so I would argue that it was less than 500 civilians that were killed, and to me, that is much less than what, the Israelis have been doing to the Palestinians.
But you said
even the year of, the year when October 7th happened, they had killed hundreds of Palestinians that year. It was the bloodiest year for kids. So that was, that was a reply to what had been happening.
All right. Well, that could have been like 5 different clips, but it's interesting that he brings up Sabra and Shatila, because later on he does I think at some point talk about Israel killing Christians, or the Jews killing more Christians than were killed in the Holocaust. Sabra and Shatila was done by Christians. Christians were killing Muslims in Lebanon. Yes, it was an area under Israeli control, but that was done by Christians. But of course, it's long ago enough that Piers won't ask about this. By the way, Piers's question is so stupid. But when did Israel kill this many? It's a numbers game. I don't understand the question, and I will at some point get to my complaints about the very choice to have this person on and then being shocked at his views, which I'm sure Piers is not, because I'm sure he looked through his Twitter before and read exactly what he heard. Anders.
Yeah, so lot of what he said here, you know, I can't fact check it. I quite frankly don't know enough of the details of it. But and to your point with Piers here again, where is the question? Where is the context? You know, okay, so let's assume for a fact that the numbers that he quoted were true, that those were the number of people that died in these different events. But in response to what? Who started it? And you'll go back, and I'm sure you'll find Arab or Palestinian or other, as you mentioned, aggression. And this is all done in self-defense by the Israelis. And of course, people do die.
Michael.
Well, one of the simplest notions that this world has sort of forgotten is that when you're victorious in a war, you generally kill more people than are killed on your side. That's how victory works. That's why in World War II, there were a lot more dead Japanese and dead Germans than there were dead Americans. I mean, I understand that now with all the way the silliness that people are thinking about stuff, it should sort of be equal because everything should sort of be proportional, which is obviously absurd. But again, you go back to the Nakba with that in mind. The Nakba was initiated by 6 armies attacking Israel and declaring war on Israel. Israel that had just become a country. It really doesn't matter what happened after that, except that Israel is still around. The fact that Israel killed a lot of people on the other side is the reason Israel is still around. And frankly, if the world had let Israel finish the job, Israel would have a lot more land, and Israel would probably have a lot more security. But of course, back then, and as has happened in every one of the 6 or 7 wars that Israel has fought since then, for its very existence, the world put the handcuffs on Israel after Israel started to win. And his entire thesis is just absurd. It's just not backed up with fact. And it's not even a context issue. And I guess we've all become a little bit inured to the word context because of how badly it was used by the former president of Harvard. But there's no context here. There's facts of how wars are fought. And if you win a war, you killed more people on the other side. That's why you won.
Also, the point about the Hannibal Directive is something I've heard elsewhere. Now, his math, I heard for the first time that less than 500 were killed. But the idea that if Israel shot a terrorist and killed Israeli civilians, it is the fault of Israel rather than the terrorists, as if this is something Israel chose to do. You know, the terrorists happen to be around. No, this is any death, and it's obvious that any death in this war is the fault of the people who chose for there to be a war. Should be obvious, but you know, going to specific actions like the supposed Hannibal Directive that was used there and blaming Israel for that is again another thing that he clearly picked up from some forum, didn't really question in any way, and is now repeating. Bonnie says in the chat, Piers is more evil than his idiotic guess. He knows exactly what he's doing, and yes. Look, Piers has this. First of all, the way he portrays himself is kind of reminds me of Bill O'Reilly when he used to say, "Look, I'm neither on the left. I'm not. I'm an independent." You know, Piers is kind of like that. He allows all views, but he doesn't allow all views, and you can't allow all views because again, you're limited in time and you're limited in the number of guests you're going to have. And a Dan Bilzerian gets an hour or 30 minutes one-on-one allowed to spew this stuff uninterrupted, while when you have people arguing for the Israeli side, you have you have them on a panel of like 6 people. You have the Israel, most of whom are anti-Israel. You have people like Emily Austin who are so apologetic about themselves being pro-Israel that it would be better if an Emily Austin just decided, you know what, I've finally realize that the Palestinians are the victim. Go to the other side, let them celebrate you for a few hours as somebody who saw the light, and just leave us alone. Because when she was on Piers Morgan, she's like, yeah, both sides commit atrocities, but and those are not defenders of Israel. Real defenders of Israel very rarely show up on this show, whereas full-on anti-Semite conspiracy theorists like Dan Bilzerian do. Any thoughts on that before we go to the next clip?
Yeah, thanks for educating me about Piers Morgan, because I clearly lack some context here. So it's interesting what you're saying, and the type of show that he appears to be running from that. Yeah.
Yeah, and by the way, I don't know how it happened that you have never been on one of the shows where we discuss Piers Morgan, because we do it frequently. But Daniel, yeah, when you do when you do the planning, so that Anders, gets to see the
Yeah,
kind of
but you,
look.
so you can just see me then as the occasional viewer that just tunes into Piers Morgan without any context, and
Yeah, well, I mean, and the thing with Piers Morgan is it's interesting enough that well, in this case, it's out there, but it is interesting enough the people that he has, that he gets the kind of audience and has grown the kind of platform that he has, and then he chooses to use it for this. Michael, any quick thoughts before we go to the next clip?
Yeah, real quick point. I mean, anybody in America, and I don't know if you have the equivalent in the UK, but we have a very important law here called the felony murder rule, which is that if you are a criminal and you're committing a felony, or if you're a putative criminal and you're committing a felony, and an innocent person gets killed by a policeman, it's the person committing the initial crime that's responsible. Because if the criminal hadn't started the whole thing, nobody would be dead. And it's exactly the same thing in a war. If you mess with me and I come and you threaten my life, and we as a country go to war, every death on your side is on you, the instigator of the war, period, full stop. And it doesn't matter if the ratio is 1,000 to 1 or 100 to 1 or 10 to 1, makes no difference. You started it. We do what we can to end it. This notion of, and this is partly because of the ridiculous concept of proportional response, which when dealing with terrorists is absurd, because they're all happy to go to Allah and go to heaven, or whatever they think. It's absurd to think about a proportional response when you're dealing with people where death is actually a desired outcome.
Thank you, Larry, for the super chat. Larry says the only reason to have Bilzerian on is to demean and discredit him. I wouldn't even I wouldn't do that. And Piers, I don't think he does that well enough. I mean, there are points where he says, "Yeah, I'm with you on Netanyahu, blah blah blah," but and you're not talking about somebody who's a critic of Israeli policy. You're talking to an actual anti-Semite who later on, again, we're not going to get to all the clips, but we hopefully will hear what he has to say about the Holocaust. So yeah, I wouldn't have him on even to demean and discredit him. Ideology says Piers Morgan is just a media whore. He's like those Far East channels that make shorts putting dogs in lion enclosures. I haven't seen those, but yeah, let me think about what I think about that analogy while we go to the next clip.
It's hard to imagine a more horrific act than what happened that day. Why would you try to downplay it?
Well, I mean, there was only 2 babies killed from what I was told, and one was in the hospital, and the other one was shot by a bullet. There was no babies in ovens. There was no, beheaded people that I saw. The rapes were disproven. So all that was Israeli propaganda. And the problem is Israel has continued to lie and lie and lie, and they've been caught lying. And they're the only ones that have actually been caught red-handed raping prisoners. And they've done it, and the people that raped the prisoners were now heroes, and they got released, and there was nothing that happened to them. So I think it's very hypocritical to focus on things that they're doing and then try and blame them, on Hamas or the Palestinians.
It's interesting because,
it's just, to me, total bullshit. It's just Israeli propaganda.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat. Yeah, okay. The rapes were disproven is, of course, something he, again, probably read on one of these forums. But then he says, oh, and only a couple of babies killed and they were just shot and stuff like that. I mean, even the stuff he says and the way he says it, even if what he was saying was fact, you would have to question his how okay he is with it. But then he goes about, there's proof of Israel raping. And there is no proof, as far as I know, of a single incident of anybody on Israel's side raping anybody on the Palestinian side. The closest we came, at least in terms of media coverage, was that incident where there was a video where soldiers picked somebody up when some of the terrorists were on the ground, picked them up, took them to the side. Then, if you look at the time and day of the video, all of a sudden it jumps 3.5 days, and then they shield whatever is going on now from the cameras. And that was reported as a video of rape. Now, there is nothing in that video that looks like it could be rape. And then the medical report said actually whatever happened was self-inflicted. But yeah, that doesn't matter to Dan Bilzerian. Anders.
Yeah, and, but even if there would have been rapes on the other side, on the Israeli side, I mean, there are bad eggs everywhere, right? So that could conceivably happen, and that is something that you as the Israeli army, I'm sure they would be addressing that accordingly, right? But again, that goes back. That's still a consequence of the fact that Hamas started all of this, and yeah, casualties of war, or whatever you want to call it, it's not right, it's not good. We'll address it, but still, it all goes back. It's on Hamas. So the casual tone in which he's talking about killing babies, it's despicable. I mean, it's it's hard to stomach.
Yeah, and you mentioned rapes would be dealt with. They're dealt with on the Palestinian side as well. You get basically welfare for life,
right?
Michael.
Yeah, nobody proved it. He didn't see any of the beheadings. He didn't. He obviously flew into the area and went down and visited the whole area, and he personally oversaw all of this, and he used, he should have reported at the time. It's the whole thing is just, how do you even, you can't deal with these people. I mean, they're flat earthers. They're people that think the emperor is wearing new clothes. They lie, and they're full of it. And as you say, Anders, his casual tone is even more despicable, because and saying only 2 babies were shot. Obviously, a lot more than 2 were killed, a lot more. But as if, well, if it's below 3 or 4, it's okay. Easy come, easy go. And the last bit is just before even all this start. We can never forget that Hamas was routinely sending missiles into the southern towns of Israel before October 7th. They were not only. The whole thing is beyond, frankly, belief. And I agree with you guys that for Piers Morgan to give this guy a platform and pick up any idiots who have decided they like what he has to say, so we're going to believe him, is really despicable, frankly.
Yeah. By the way, Michael, I think they're not flat earthers. They're not round earthers. They just left the cult of science. Thank you, Laura Seto, for the super chat. Laura Seto says there needs to be a linguistic study of how Piers manages to destroy moral clarity while sounding kind and even-handed tonally. Oscilloscope needed. All right, let's go to the next clip.
I mean, look, I got no dog in this fight, Piers. I'm not Palestinian. I'm not Muslim. I'm just saying what I believe is right. And let's just say there was rapes. I mean, I think that's terrible. But like I said, they are, an occupied state, and they're operating in apartheid. So when you are kept in an open air prison, there's going to be resistance, and how that resistance manifests itself is, it's going to be violent eventually. I mean, if you kill enough people and you take enough land and you treat people like second-class citizens, and and you're stealing land in the West Bank, and you're just basically, encroaching these people's human rights on a daily basis, there's going to be repercussions. So, I'm not going to be the judge or jury, and I'm not going to condemn these people for fighting back. I think nobody had an issue with, South African apartheid and their resistance. So I don't know why there's an issue with the resistance in the clear apartheid that's going on here.
Yeah, if there was rape, it was terrible. But, did you see how short her skirt was? By the way, that's the closest he ever comes to actually saying that anything that the Palestinians did or do might be wrong, but it's followed by a but and an explanation why he's right. Thank you, Alex, for the super chat. Alex says he speaks like jihadi chat GPT. I mean, that is chat GBT, yeah, because it's in Arabic. But yeah, that I'm sure somebody will actually invent that at some point. Anders, you're muted.
The way he's throwing around the term apartheid here is, I mean, it's frankly ridiculous. I mean, define your terms. It's in a way, this is standard progressive tactics, to dilute the terms and to make them meaningless, pretty much, just like genocide. I mean, he's consistently doing this throughout, and I don't know if he's intelligent enough to know what he's doing, or he's just been baited on all of this. I don't want to give him any benefit of the doubt. I think he's truly and quite frankly an evil person. But yeah, it just goes on and on here from clip to clip.
Yeah, Michael.
If you took what he said at face value, you'd agree with him. So it makes a very nice fantasy story. If you're into that sort of fantasy story, of course, all of it is upside down, completely upside down. And it is exactly what Anders said. It is the way progressives like to talk about everything, devoid of any facts. And it's not even in context. It's just incorrect facts.
And Alex says it's chat GBT because Arabs can't pronounce P. Yeah, I kind of got that after I read it with my own correction. And then, yeah, but all right, let's go to the next clip.
What do you mean the Jews killed JFK?
So I believe that was an Israeli Mossad operation, and they've committed multiple false flag attacks. I mean, they've, the USS Liberty, you've got the Lebanon affair. I mean, so they've got a history of doing this, and I don't think it's crazy to think that they were involved in that assassination, and that's the reason that Trump didn't want to, release those files. And I think clearly it had to be embarrassing. Otherwise, why wouldn't he want to release it? And that's the only thing that I could think of that would be embarrassing, because everybody from that time is pretty much dead by now. So it would make sense. I mean, they wanted to cut off, it's now AIPAC, but the Zionist, organization that was doing all the funding that should have been registered as a foreign entity. And, he wanted to register them under FARA. He wanted to, take away their ability to have nukes. And, they didn't like that. So I believe that they killed JFK.
But just to be clear, I mean, you have absolutely no evidence that any Jews killed JFK, do you? Nothing.
Well, I mean, that's not true. I mean, Jack Rubenstein, that was the person that killed the supposed Patsy Lee Harvey Oswald. I mean, he was a Jewish mob guy. And, there's been numerous documentaries tying the, Jewish mafia, the CIA. I mean, I wasn't there, but everything that I've seen evidence-wise points to Israel.
Really?
And, they're doing it in Epstein Island. They did it in Epstein Island. I mean, they've...
You notice that pronunciation, Jack Rubenstein, like just so you know who we're talking about here. Yeah, Alex says he doesn't even get the right fucking conspiracy theories in order. Yeah, it's kind of, again, somebody who read but not carefully some neo-Nazi forum and has some sort of stream of consciousness where, well, how do you know that the Jews killed JFK? Well, yeah, Epstein Island and USS Liberty, like he can't form a not even a coherent sentence, but a coherent like point that is sticking to the point without going to without kind of including all of the different anti-Semitic conspiracy theories in one go. Anders.
Yeah, no, so I mean, now it's becoming laughable here. And I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of someone who may be following this guy. And all right, let's assume that, so far, someone who likes what he's been posting with his girlfriends and stuff may may automatically think that this guy has something to say, and he has been talking about Israel, and you're thinking, wow, maybe this guy has a point. Maybe I need to look into this a little bit more or whatever. But then you get to the Kennedy assassination, and yeah, we know there are a lot of conspiracy theories around that. But as Piers actually say, I mean, it has been thoroughly proven that there is nothing to it. It's purely conspiracy theories. So you'd think that he'd start to lose his audience at this point, but who knows?
I love what a hopeless romantic you are, referring to them as girlfriends. The finest girlfriends, $60 million in poker earnings can buy. But anyway.
Okay, yeah, well, I'm not on Instagram very frequently, so I'm not a follower.
Well, he doesn't do that anymore. Now he's
Okay.
transitioning into Islam as we get to in the super
Okay.
chat. Michael.
You say he's transitioning, but of course he has no skin in the game. As he said, he has no point of view at just becoming Muslim. Frankly, in medicine, I'm a doctor by training, and we would say this guy is psychotic, and we would say this guy needs to be on antipsychotic medications. And if he is already, he's not taking them. I mean, he's clearly psychotic, and you end up following these people at your own peril, and generally they end up causing great death in the world. I mean, this is nuts. And if you, like you said, Razi, if he had any possible shred of credibility before and sounded mildly coherent, this is really off the edge. I mean, this is over it.
And it gets better, worse. I don't know how you what do you want to call it. But we do have a couple of super chats. Thanks, Dan. Dan, not Bilzerian. Dan Dave says, although Dan Bilzerian can afford super chat, so if you are watching, which I'm sure you are, feel free to let us know what you think. Dan Dave says, I'm pretty sure he will soon announce his conversion to Islam like Andrew Tate. He is an Armenian who were nearly wiped out by Turkish jihadists. Clearly, you haven't watched this interview, because if you watch it, it wasn't Turkish jihadists, it was the Jews. Yeah, I don't know if we're going to get to that clip, but that is actually something he says there. And thank you, Dan Dave, for another super chat. Dan says, those are not girlfriends, but 72 virgins. First of all, this was what he did all the time, so I think there were more than 72. I doubt there were any virgins, but, as he says, I wasn't there, so I don't know. And thank you, Larasetto, for the super chat. Larasetto says, Bilzerian aspirates a big after each lie. As somebody who says too much, that's not necessarily a sign of lying, but in his case, I don't know. But let's listen to some more.
And you said on Patrick Ben Davis' podcast as well, they play the victim card so effing much about Jewish people. I mean, do you not understand why Jewish people might feel a sense of victimhood, given that 6 million of them were killed in World War II by a genocidal monster in the Holocaust? Do you not understand why that might make Jewish people feel that, yes, they have indeed been victims?
Yeah, I mean, that figure's been revised, but, I believe that Jewish supremacy is the greatest threat to America, and I think it's the greatest threat to the world today. I truly believe that.
What do you mean the figure's been revised? What do you mean?
Well, they said that it was 4 million that died in Auschwitz, and then they said it was down to 1 million, so they've revised the figure.
Well, how many people? How many people do you think were killed in the Holocaust?
271,000 that died in Auschwitz.
How many do you think were killed in the Holocaust?
I don't know, but I would bet my entire net worth that it was under 6 million.
Again, I simply ask you, Dan, what's the motivation for making claims like that? What do you stand to gain by trying to diminish what happened in World War II?
I'm just answering your question. I mean, I'm a gambler, so if I think that something is a low probability, then I would bet on it. And I don't know for a fact, but the evidence all says that it was less than 6 million. I mean, just the mathematics don't work. Like, you can't cremate that many bodies. Like, the whole gas chamber thing, it's a very ineffective way to kill people. So when people have researched this and they've done the due diligence, they said it's mathematically impossible.
Okay, I don't really know how to comment on that, except for, what he's saying, kind of between the lines, which is, look, it wasn't 6 million, it was just 1 million. So what are the Jews making such a fuss about? Again, even his revisionist history doesn't, nobody should come to the conclusion that he's coming to from his alternative facts. But anyway, feels kind of wrong just to even try to engage with the ideas, if you want to call them that. Anders.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't really know what to say. It's beyond ridiculous, and as I said previously, if I mean him. I looked up his Instagram account, and he's still into babes. I'll tell you that. I just looked at his Twitter account, and he posted the interview with Piers, and he basically said, "Not my best interview, but I said what needed to be said." Yeah, I'm kind of speechless. I don't even know if we should give him the benefit of our airtime here. It's
Well, I agree with being speechless. The reason we give such people airtime is because we are far further outside of the mainstream than the ideas that he's expressing. And he's getting a platform on Piers Morgan where, more people are going to watch that interview than, watch this channel in several months. So, yeah, such people and such views will exist, even in a rational society, but they will be, standing on a street corner with a rolled up magazine rolled up into a megaphone. That's where they belong, not on major platforms that nobody would invite us onto because we are so outside of the mainstream. So, Michael.
Yeah, it's the numbers, just so everybody who looks this up, the numbers have been checked both from the ground up and from the top down, meaning the number of Jews in the world after World War II was more than 6 million lower than it was before World War II. That's well documented. And there weren't, to anybody's knowledge, there were not Jews being exterminated in any place other than Germany and its death camps in Poland and other places, and the camps all over Eastern Europe. So the numbers are very clear. This has been studied over, it's one of the most studied topics in the world, and this notion that it's been revised is just absurd. And it's also worth pointing out that the Germans killed overall 10 million people, including gypsies and gays and this sort of thing. And those are the people that he also would like to exterminate because he's converting to Islam and so on. It's really remarkable. If this were 60 years ago in the United States, he would basically be putting on a KKK outfit with a white hat and eye slits in it, and he would be out there killing blacks somewhere or speaking out against, and the FBI would be after him. It is a sad state in the world that somebody can get up there and have a platform this size because of modern communication technology and spew this stuff. But it just gets back to the people listening have got to have a brain. You have to be able to think. And all you need to do is fact check something. It takes 2 minutes to fact check this. And you're not going to find anything that contradicts the current going theory, which is that 6 million, not theory, but that 6 million people were exterminated in Germany, and they were extremely efficient and they had a lot of time.
Yeah.
But
go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, I was just thinking, because, and to address a little bit the epistemological side of this, we know that when you deal with conspiracy theorists, or rather you don't, you get to a certain point and you basically said, I mean, the onus of proof is on he who has searched something, right? And so when he says that not as many people died in the Holocaust as he said, you know, it's on him to prove it, but these are arbitrary assertions, basically. So you know, you should just, and I understand, I mean, you shouldn't even engage. I understand, Razi, that this needs to be, I mean, these people need to be shunned one way or another, and it's a difficult balance there of whether you should even give them the credit of talking about them versus just ignoring them. And I don't know where to draw the line, but basically we're talking conspiracy theorists here, and you know, you can't deal with them.
Yeah, I'm with you on not engaging in the sense that, you know, if he was watching this show and said, you know what, I'd like to come on and debate you, you know, we'd get viewership like never before, but there's not a second that I'm going to think, oh yeah, let's do it. But again, it is his place in the culture and Piers Morgan's place in the culture that's
Yeah.
significant here. And Michael, to your point, I'm sure he thinks the FBI is already after him because it's run by Jews. But you know, he is doing this interview from Qatar, where he is much safer from such threats. Thank you, Alex, for the super chat. Alex says he's a historian, a mathematician, and a psychic. Thank you, Loresetto, for the super chat. Loresetto says, Razi, your is entirely different. Rest easy. Thanks. Still good to get rid of it, but that'll take a while. Thank you, PC, for the super chat. PC says, Dan is a vile, open anti-Semite. Alex, thank you for another super chat. Alex says he hates the Jews that live rent-free in his head. Thank you, PC, for another super chat. PC says, Razi, remember quality, not quantity. I think we do both. And thank you, Alex, for another super chat. Alex says Dan has such desperate pick me, love me vibes. Let's get some more of those vibes.
I mean, Jews have killed far more Christians. Well, Jews have killed far more. Let's just accept the 6 million figure. Jews have killed far more Christians than that. I mean, it's not even close. If you look at the Bolshevik genocide, you look at the Holodomor, I mean, they've killed way more Christians. I mean, they basically invented the genocide. So, you know, they deny the Armenian genocide. Israel denies that. They've lobbied the U.S. to deny that. I'm Armenian. They killed half of my people. So, you know, and I'm not offended by that. You know, if somebody questions that, it's not some crazy thing. I mean, Israel denies the Armenian Holocaust. Okay.
Okay, so yeah, if you're wondering, as soon as you heard that the Jews killed way more than 6 million Christians, it's good that he gave us the details. Basically, wherever people were murdered, it's the Jews. That's how you get to much more than 6 million. Anders.
Yeah, it's you know, he's bringing up the Bolshevik angle, and of course that is a classical way a classic way of blaming the Jews as well, because yeah, de facto there were a lot of Jewish socialists in Europe back around the turn of the last century, and they were fighting the Nazis, and then unfortunately, you know, they were on the wrong side of history as well, and they turned into the whole Eastern Europe or worldwide communist genocide, I guess. But you know, that's, I mean, it's the whole ethnic, tribal, racist angle to the discussion. I mean, you can still condemn the Jews who took part in the communist genocide, but it's not because they were Jews; it's because they were communists. You know.
Yeah, I mean, to blame, you know, the Jews for what the Soviets did, considering what Jews went through in the Soviet Union and it's, of course, Pierce doesn't bring that up, but why would he? Good for ratings. Michael.
And then he blames the Jews for killing half the Armenians, which is factually just completely blatantly wrong. They didn't kill any Armenians. I mean, not any number that was involved in any sort of military operation or any operation that anyone's aware of. They weren't the ones that killed the Armenians, period.
So I'm not sure that's what he was saying there. He did say that, Israel is denying the Armenian Holocaust, and then he said they killed half my people. And they, I would also assume, is referring to Jews, but it could be, just whoever it was, and the Jews are denying it. But yeah, that's what
Yeah, I thought he was referring to the Jews killing half his people.
Well, I wouldn't put it past him, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And the Holocaust comment probably has to do with the fact that the Jews take issue that the event that was the Holocaust with capital H was the World War II Holocaust, where the Nazis exterminated the Jews in the most industrial death operation ever conceived. And certainly there were massacres of Armenians, which is what most people refer to the Armenian situation as. Anyhow.
Thank you, Larry.
Yeah, so I think the Armenian the attacks on Armenians by Turks, I think that rightly qualifies as a genocide. And it's true that Israel hasn't acknowledged or hasn't officially acknowledged. I don't know that Israel, it's not conspiracy theorists in that they question that it took place, but not having acknowledged it, I think, is more. I mean, you can criticize and question that, but I think it has a foreign policy angle to it that goes a little bit beyond me. But in one sense, he actually got in a fact here in this discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me go to the super chats, and I was going to comment on that as well when we get to the relevant super chat. Thank you, Larry. Larry says, I'd be laughing too hard to ask him questions. I don't know. I wasn't laughing at any point when I watched this for the first time. Thank you, Alex, for the super chat. Alex says, it's easier to ask Dan what the Jews didn't do. Well, but Piers wanted a 30-minute interview, not a 5-second interview. Thank you, PC, for another super chat. PC says, I do think Israel should recognize the Armenian genocide, but the rest of his stuff is anti-Semitism. Well, even in this context, it's anti-Semitism. Many countries, unfortunately, don't recognize the Armenian genocide. And what's shocking in Israel's case is this is to appease Turkey, a country that is, as anti-Semitic as possible and is a supporter of the attempt to commit a genocide against the Jews. So why Israel keeps appeasing Turkey is, that's a topic for another day, and we will go there, Israel, unless you.
Well, now that Turkey's cut ties with Israel as of today, maybe they will stop appeasing.
Have they properly cut ties? I nenever know what.
Yeah, Erdogan announced it, that all diplomatic and trade ties were being cut.
Nice.
Today.
All right. Well, yep. I feel for all the people who in Israel who travel with Turkish Airlines because it's cheaper.
Yes.
And for me.
Well said, Rafi.
For me, this was always, I wanted to go to Israel. If the only thing I could afford was Turkish Airlines, I wouldn't go. And this was a decision I had made in the past at times. Like, that was not an option. And people think longer term than the immediate moment. Thank you, Alex, for another super chat. Dan's father is also his uncle, bless his heart. That is not verified by independent fact checkers. All right, let's I think we have time for at least one more clip. Let's go to it.
Do you accept, Dan, that you are just blatantly anti-Semitic?
Look, I have an issue with that term. I mean, I think the real Semites are the Palestinians. I mean, the DNA tests that they've done on the Israelis that are living over there, they're Eastern European Ashkenazi Jews. I don't even think they're actual Semites. They don't have ancient Hebrew DNA, which is why DNA testing is illegal in Israel.
I mean, you're literally denying their existence now. I mean, you are just a brazen anti-Semite, aren't you? you hate Jewish people, you hate Israel, you hate the state of Israel, its government, everything about it. You're blaming them you blame them in this interview for literally absolutely everything.
When you say, well, I think most of the problems today is caused by Jewish supremacy. I believe that.
I'm honestly gobsmacked that you would say all this publicly, given what a high profile you have.
Yeah, I would bet Dan Bilzerian's entire net worth that Piers Morgan is not gobsmacked because again, he knew who he's bringing on. We didn't get to some of the we got to some of the specific things that he blames the Jews on. We didn't get to some of the rest, like transgenders. And there was something about Kamala Harris said this or that. Literally, just anything he doesn't like that happens in the world, he blames on the Jews. And again, not coherently. He just throws it out there and expects it to stick. Anders.
Yeah, so I guess we're close to wrapping up here. As much as we see these guys as a threat and as much as he has an audience, to your point, he's not coherent. I mean, he's ruled by his emotions and it's coming out in these attacks. And just the way how he's twisting the term anti-Semite here in this latest clip, it's just ridiculous. I mean, it's kind of interesting that he goes back and make it a question of ethnicity, when really we all know that anti-Semitism is a term that clearly applies to hating Jews, so.
Yeah, and you can always answer the question, I don't like that term, but yes, I hate all the Jews, and I give it a different term. Michael.
Yeah, I think it's good to take a step back and look at this guy's so-called philosophy or how he strings it all together. And the answer is that you end up with a world that applauds terrorism. And that means that if you're gay, you're dead. And if you're a woman, you're suppressed, raped. And if you step out of line, you're dead. And if you're anybody but a Shiite Muslim, you're dead. And pretty much death is the end of pretty much everything. And that's where these people end up. People like him are along for the ride for a while, and then they cross one of the leaders of the cult that they support, and then they're dead. So that's not certainly anything I would ever want to be involved in, and I wouldn't want to be involved with people that would support somebody like this.
All right, we are out of time. Let me quickly say, yeah, there's a lot more in that interview. If you feel inspired to watch more of Dan Bilzerian, the link will be in the chat, and you can find him on social media. Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat. Jonathan says, most of the problems today are caused by Jews, according to Dan. I don't think he said most. It didn't seem like there were any that he didn't include. And thank you, PC, for the super chat. PC says, okay, my 100% Ashkenazi wife's DNA is 60% East Mediterranean, Levant, as shown by living DNA, GEDmatch, and others. My own DNA is mostly North African and Levantine. He's wrong. Well, I don't know if we need to go through like facts to try to disprove him, just letting him talk, but the super chat does get us closer to our goal of matching his imaginary poker earnings for our budget for next year. Anders, quickly, where can people find more from you?
Well, for a palate cleanser after this discussion, check out my Substack, andersingemarsson.substack.com, to get a positive spin on things around us.
And Michael, where can people find more from you?
Kaufman with 2 Fs on LinkedIn.
I'm Razi Ginsburg on X. Not quite as many followers as Dan Bilzerian, but if you follow me, maybe I'll get even closer. Thanks, guys, for joining me. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow with the Daily Objective and the reality show.
Bye-bye.